Welcome back, everyone. I am Cas Piancey. I'm joined, as usual, by my partner in crime, Mr. Bennett Tomlin. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Cas?
Good. It's been a weird few days, even despite the weekend. Yeah, a lot of weird news breaking. I guess that's just always cryptocurrency, which is good. We're in the news business anyway. So today, we're talking about a topic that we've previously discussed throughout other episodes. I don't think we ever directly had an episode only about this. But today we're talking about Prime Trust again because there's been some new news, kind of allegations dropping, understandings of what's going on behind the scenes. If anyone's unfamiliar, Prime Trust is a Nevada-based trust that was associated with cryptocurrency. They were essentially the bank. Bank is not the right word, but it is the word I'm going to use here. But they were banking a bunch of cryptocurrency exchanges and clients and all of this. And basically, it's been discovered and confirmed that they lost a ton of money, almost $100 million, which is just kind of incredible. Take it away, Bennett. What's happening here? How did they lose this money? What are the ramifications of it?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we've talked about Prime Trust before, I think most recently in episode 121 with Jonathan Reiter and Patrick Tan of Chain Argos. But what we got most recently is the first day declaration in the bankruptcy by the current interim CEO, Jor Law. And it reveals a few things that have been previously hinted at, but puts numbers on them and really kind of points towards serious management and operational issues with Prime Trust, which, as you said, was like the payment processor for many of these cryptocurrency companies. Binance US, TrueUSD, all the TrueCoins. There was tons of companies that were using Prime Trust as their backend. And so what the declaration revealed was, I think, first, what was most shocking to me was that they had invested customer funds into Terra, and they ended up losing about $6 million in customer deposits and $2 million in corporate funds when Terra went to zero. We've talked about Terra on this podcast before. It was a Ponzi scheme that was inevitably going to zero. And so it's pretty shocking to hear about a generally well-respected trust company putting customer funds directly into a Ponzi scheme.
I don't know if we can call it well-respected.
In the industry.
Even then, I mean, what does that even mean, given our industry?
Well, I think that's kind of the point here. That's the point of FTX. That's the point of Alameda Research. That's the point of Prime Trust, is the most respected whatevers are doing the same shit as the least respected whatevers.
I do want to, and I want to kind of pause you here for a second. So obviously, as you mentioned, we've talked about it. It's a Ponzi scheme. That's what Terra and Luna were. Just for a little bit more background on that, it was a stablecoin ecosystem. Basically, you had this coin with no value whatsoever except that assigned to it by the market. And they used that coin to create a stablecoin. And you can guess how that went. It didn't go well. If you're somehow unfamiliar with it, I assume everybody listening is familiar with it. But regardless, the point I want to swing back to here is that you said $6 million in customer funds were utilized and lost on this gamble. And let's call it what it is. It's a gamble. I'm curious because let me put it this way. I have a brokerage account that actually a broker takes care of. That broker has a fiduciary duty to not do stuff like what you just mentioned, right? And if they broach that fiduciary duty, not only do they ultimately, I would assume, owe me money and like going to be liable in court, and I'm going to take them to court and all of this stuff. They won't be able to work at a brokerage anymore. Like, there are serious ramifications for this stuff. But for a trust fund, like what happens? How is this possible? Like, aren't they breaching their fiduciary duties? Isn't there something wrong going on here?
Yes. It's almost certain that they were not in compliance with Nevada's regulations about what assets that they were supposed to be holding as this type of trust company. And we've talked about this $6 million in customer funds, and that's the smaller portion of their misappropriation of customer funds, because they also had a separate multi-signature wallet that they were using to custody cryptocurrencies. And then they decided that they were no longer going to roll their own custody system and instead were going to move to Fireblocks, another crypto custody service provider doing multi-sig stuff. But Prime Trust accidentally, incidentally, unintentionally, whatever, directed some customers to continue depositing into the old multi-signature wallet. And at some point, they lost the hardware wallets and the seeds for it and ended up using approximately $76 million in customer funds to buy more Ethereum to cover requested withdrawals.
How are they able to use customer funds to do any of it?
And this is the important point and something we've talked about before. Many financial regulators are not well-resourced enough to do regular enforcement and checks of compliance with laws. This is true for state-level trust companies, for money transmitter licenses across the nations, and even for at a certain level, like state-chartered banks and things like that, there can be serious gaps in oversight. And so I think
not just state-chartered banks, by the way, Federal Reserve
Sure.
regulated banks and other banks that are under the guidance of major regulators that people like us expect to have a pulse on what's going on and what's going wrong. And I think even if we just look at the major bank failures we've seen this year, clearly regulators are not up to the task.
Yes. And so that's a big part of it. A lot of it depends on basically these regulators say, you as the directors of or whatever of this corporation sign something saying you're upholding all these regulations. And that's kind of the extent of it, is my impression in a lot of places. And even in the example of Prime Trust, it was eventually discovered that they didn't have enough Ethereum in December 2021 by the then management team, but it wasn't revealed to the board of directors until August of 2022. And that period there is when this management team, allegedly, I guess, was misappropriating customer funds in order to cover this massive shortfall of cryptocurrency. And during that period, they were in violation of Nevada's responsibilities. That's what they say in the declaration. But the board of directors didn't know. It was a secret that was kept hidden. And when the board of directors did find out, they fired the existing C-suite, elevated new people to C-level positions, and then they said they reported it to regulators in September of 2022. And that's where we get into Prime Trust tried to raise a Series C that Nevada was aware of to try to kind of close that gap from existing shareholders and weren't able to get the money and a bunch of stuff like that. But yeah, the regulators were not aware for almost a year that Prime Trust was in breach.
I mean, that's wild. And also, even from what you're describing, it just sounds like not a lot of responsibility for their actions being taken. It sounds like a lot of passing the buck on to whoever they can. But it also sounds like regulators haven't even caught up to that part of the story yet. Who's going to go to jail for this?
Well, that's an interesting question, you see, because we've been talking about previous management here kind of in the abstract. And they're not in the abstract. They're real human beings like Scott Purcell, who was the chief executive officer of Prime Trust during this period. Also, during much of this period until they spun it out, Prime Trust had a subsidiary called Bank. Bank is also now bankrupt, and
is this
BANQ?
BANQ?
Yes, and was also led by Scott Purcell. Bank's current executive team alleges in their bankruptcy proceedings that Scott Purcell stole all of their corporate IP, their communications, their client records in order to go start Fortress Trust, another cryptocurrency trust company, which as of today is still operating and is being used by Swan and a variety of other clients in the cryptocurrency space. And there are serious allegations, both in the Prime Trust bankruptcy, in the Nevada cease and desist order, and in the bank bankruptcy against the current executives of that firm, which is still actively servicing clients in the industry.
It's wild too, right? Fortress Trust, Nevada-based trust, started by this guy, still in operation. I can go to the website right now, Web3, blah, 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 compliance, all this shit. I mean, if this guy really stole this money, which granted, we don't know, right? But if he did, or he helped to, it's kind of crazy that, and I'm on their site. Here we go. Trusted by Circle, Solana, Swan, Google Cloud, Checkout.com. why are these companies trusting Fireblocks? There's Fireblocks again. Like, why are these companies trusting this guy? And is this a matter of what we've seen before, what you and I are quite familiar with, which is like Capital Corp being everyone knowing. I think it was Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, had previously said that like everyone was aware that Capital Corp was dirty, but that everyone used it still because they had no other options. And I wonder if we look at something like this, where you go, well, this guy freaking supposedly, allegedly scammed a bunch of people. Why are these companies going right back to him after they've found this out?
Well, yeah, I think it's like you alleged right there. They don't have a lot of other options.
Yeah, I also want to bring up how similar this sounds to Quadriga, another early cryptocurrency exchange that you and I were keen to explore back in the day. The difference here being these guys misplaced money, stole from customers to make up for the misplaced cryptocurrencies, which happened at Quadriga as well, and then made a bunch of bad bets, which also happened at Quadriga. The only difference here is that the CEO and the people involved are still alive. And Gerald Cotton, maybe he's still alive, but as far as we know, he's dead, and he at least has disappeared. So we don't have anything as juicy as that with this Prime Trust story yet. But this is kind of crazy, right? Like the idea that, as you said, one of the larger, more trusted names in the cryptocurrency industry has this happen and then just restarts the scam. Like obviously not the people currently at Prime Trust, to be clear, the people who formerly were at Prime Trust, but their ability to restart this thing and just continue. I mean, we see this over and over and over again. There are no consequences for so many of these scammers.
Yeah. And so you asked who's going to go to jail. My answer is if anyone's going to jail, it is the former C-level executive suite who were involved in the cover-up of this loss of funds and this misappropriation of customer assets. And what's going to be really inconvenient for much of the cryptocurrency industry, if that were to occur, and assuming these allegations are true, is that it would mean that a bunch of them had continued to work with these people after all of this, and presumably are still working with Fortress today. It's also funny that Fortress lists a bunch of people that are definitely like their vendors as like people using them, right? Like Google Cloud is not using Fortress Trust. Fortress Trust is definitely using Google Cloud, right?
Oh, the classic partnership thing.
Exactly.
Where it's not really a partnership.
And like, I bet that's true for a couple of those companies on there.
This is every terrible cliche that we see in crypto. Like over and over again. It's just every single one blatantly exposed out in the open. And I'm like, it's exhausting, you know? Like this is so exhausting because it feels like we're not even reporting anything new. We got to interview
in a little bit of a sense, we're not, right? Like the Nevada cease and desist and the original bankruptcy declaration both included that there was this shortfall related to this multi-signature wallet they lost access to. And like we knew there was a massive shortfall in like fiat assets. And so we could kind of piece together what likely happened, right? Customer assets were used to cover the crypto shortfall. But this is it in black and white being declared by the current CEO of the firm that millions and millions of dollars of customer funds were either gambled on Ponzi schemes or lost covering up the incompetence of the management team.
But there's already so many more questions that are unanswered even there, right? Like the idea that Prime Trust did another funding round after tried to accomplish another funding round after they knew they were in trouble, and like Nevada being like, yeah, go ahead, go for it, despite also being aware that these guys were in trouble. And apparently if they'd reported to regulators that they'd lost all this money and that customer funds had been utilized, why let them go forward with another funding round? Like why allow this? This is crazy.
Yeah, I think the idea was that it was a potentially profitable business. Though the previous management team had managed to rack up quite a few months of consecutive losses.
Everything is potentially profitable. That doesn't fucking mean anything.
I guess the idea was if existing investors were willing to step up and cover it, that meant no customer funds were lost. And what was at risk was potentially more investor capital. And like from the regulator point of view, that seems like the best case scenario, right?
I guess so. I really don't know. I don't know what, like... Let me put it this way. I'll just go to the most basic terms here. If Charles Ponzi was in charge of the Ponzi company and it was a blatant scam, and regulators are told by once the CEO, Charles Ponzi, is outed as CEO, they get rid of him. New new scammer comes on board. Sorry, not a scammer. New person comes on board. Okay. And they say, oh man, this Ponzi company is in big fucking trouble. I don't know what we're going to do to get out of this. We're going to raise more money, I guess. Why would the government say okay to that? It's just wild to me. Like as you said, I guess the reasoning is maybe they're going to be able to pull out of this and everything's going to be okay. Why is that the last resort?
Well, and I think the idea is even if they don't necessarily pull out of it, we'd rather Tiger Capital loses another $100 million than the clients of Prime Trust,
Not to be on the venture capitalist side here or anything, but like, that's just so dirty. It just sounds so dirty, right? Even if I hate Tiger sure. Global, and I hate Apollo Capital or whatever. Like, I hate BlackRock too. I'm right there with you guys. But like being like, let's make them foot the bill as opposed to these smaller clients. Like, I hear it. I also am like, that's dirty as shit if that was actually the intention.
I think the idea is it was disclosed to investors that the business was in this state and needed a new round of funding to continue operations or it was going to cease.
And they still thought someone was going to foot the bill on this? Like, why?
I mean,
this is what I mean.
They got, 50% of their round closed before having to call it off? So they didn't get enough commitments. There weren't enough people who were willing to go for another run at that.
No shit. This is what I mean. No shit.
Yeah.
The whole thing is fucking dirty to me. This is what I mean.
And it's funny. It's funny because Prime Trust tries to blame some vague, like, they're like, our investors would have been there if it weren't for, liquidity issues.
You mean they don't have any money? Is that what you mean? Your clients who fucking got the money stolen out?
Our investors assured us that they would have been there if it weren't for, other liquidity issues. I guess, so maybe their investors had all their capital on FTX. I don't know.
Or in Terra and Luna, or in, or in any number of other fucking things that have just gotten shit piled in the past year. I don't know. This is what I mean when I say, like, okay, it's different. This time it's different, I guess. It feels like the same story over and over again. And we got to talk this. I know this episode is coming out before the more fun episode in a few weeks that we got to interview someone very cool. And I think one of the things that he said was something along the lines of, like, there's thousands of these coins. Most of them are scams. And like, even if you wanted to chase after these, like, why? Like, there's no enthralling story of every single scam coin. Writing about every single one is just not, like, it's in no one's interest, from the writer to the consumers to anyone. Like, no one wants to write about the same scam over and over again. And I think this is part of, like, why I struggled to allow us to even cover Terra and Luna till a few days before it collapsed, was because I was like, okay, it's another Ponzi, just like all the other Ponzis. Like, who fucking cares? And the only reason that was an important one is because of all the money that it had accumulated, right? Like, yeah. I just, it's, you understand where I'm coming from. It's very frustrating. It feels like we're reporting the same story over and over again. It's frustrating.
Yeah. And like, the last point I think we really need to kind of hammer in here is that this is the same story. It's cryptocurrency executives steal from customers to gamble and cover up their own incompetence. And again, it's coming from one of what was supposed to be the, like, vanguard of legitimate cryptocurrency companies, like a serious provider of serious financial services to supposedly serious companies, turns out to be making a series of very unserious decisions. And it's a story we hit so often when we're discussing these cryptocurrency companies. You hear that FTX is the future everything super app, or that Alameda Research is going to be the, like, single largest hedge fund in the world. Three Arrows Capital has correctly predicted the super cycle and is going to be, like, the defining whatever. And in all of these cases, it is the most basic type of fraud. It is the asshole steals from his customers to benefit himself.
And you can go back. This is not new in terms of only the past few years or something. You go back to Bitcoin Talk forum days, and it's the same thing, right? And I think this is the hypocrisy of it that bothers us, perhaps. Maybe not you, maybe just me, but, like, I think this is, like, serious in terms of how much it bothers me in particular, is this idea that Bitcoin was founded on the concept of not trusting anybody with your finances. Whether it's a bank or another person, the whole point of Bitcoin is that it's this ability to not trust and still move money. It doesn't mean that it's the most important financial asset ever. It doesn't mean that it is going to going to make finance a completely different place forever. It just means that it's this very specific thing that does this very specific thing. And the fact that immediately people were like, okay, so how can we create a bank that accepts Bitcoin or like trades you for Bitcoin? It's like, okay, so we're skipping right past the most important part of this and going right back to the whole point that Satoshi was like, fuck the banks, essentially. And now we're like, okay, but let's bring the banks into this and let's have our own banks. And then when they fuck you over and they fuck the customer over, because they're supposed to be operating as banks, but they're even worse because they're unregulated. They don't abide by any laws. They're totally willing, as we've seen time and time again, to steal customer funds, which at least that shit doesn't happen at bank. It like, complain all you want about your local American big bank. Fine. But at least they're not straight up just taking your funds and doing whatever the fuck they want with them, right? You still have access to them. I like this just, it's so hypocritical to what cryptocurrency is supposed to stand for, to be like, okay, so now we're going to bring this trust company in and that'll hold your money for you. And it can be profitable for everybody. And like, what are we doing? What is happening here? Or the stable coin with the Terra and the Luna and what are we doing? What is this? Why are we doing this? Is there a reason to do it? Is this innovative? Is it interesting? Is it changing the world? And the answer is no. The answer is no to for all the stuff I just mentioned, it is no. There could be DeFi protocols or decentralized exchanges or something. You want to talk about something different? Fine. Maybe there's real world use case there and niche use cases there, but like a trust company helping cryptocurrency companies, there is no fucking innovation there. There's none.
Yeah, you're right. There's not. It turns out that a series of unregulated banks, bucket shops, and loan sharks, primarily incorporated in jurisdictions with extraordinary financial privacy laws, results in a bunch of their clients getting taken advantage of. A thing that was known before they all started doing this. But this is why we also cover other financial frauds, is because these are the same. It's the same. It's all this fucking same.
Yeah, this is why we've talked about WorldCom, we've talked about Enron, we've talked about historical frauds. You gotta break it up and have more interesting things. I also think like intention is interesting. Like I do think that like SBF, I think his intentions were awful, but I also think he was like, fuck, I need to cover this. I got to leverage up so I can cover this and get my customers their money back. And he really believed that he could do it. Like that doesn't, I think he should go to prison for decades, but I think the belief was really there. Like who knows what the fucking intention was at Prime Trust with the C-suite. Like I have no idea, but I doubt it was even something as simple as like, sure, we just need to lever up and then we'll be okay. Like you're a trust. That ain't how it works. You're not an exchange even. You're not a hedge fund. Like that is not how you should be operating. So it is a little bit different, but gosh, it's tiring. On that note, I do want to announce that Cascoin is getting into the trust industry. And this is an innovative alteration to the trust industry. We're going to have full control. It's going to be Cascoin DAO is going to be controlling Cascoin Trust. And of course, this is all under the umbrella of Cascoin Co-op, which is owned by Cascoin Exchange. So it's not really, it is a co-op, but it's not a co-op. And you get ownership rights through the non-ownership NFTs that we will be giving away through Cascoin. So make sure you sign up today.